Hello, welcome to another episode of Field of Screams podcast. Today we'll be talking about Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. By this time in the franchise, the executives, having already been through 6 different movies, they wanted to have a crossover of some sorts. They went to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and asked them if they wanted to do a Freddy vs. Jason movie. But the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise was booming at the time, and they already had plans for Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Warriors, so they declined. What Friday the 13th decided to do was they were going to make a crossover that seemed very familiar, but they wouldn't use it by name. I mean, technically this film is Carrie versus Jason. Now on paper, that sounds like a very great idea. I remember when I decided to marathon the Friday the 13th franchise the first time, I was kind of just going through seeing what all of them were about. You know, I saw one of them, he went to New York, then he goes to space. But one that kind of caught my eye was basically this Carrie versus Jason type movie. I was like, ooh, that sounds really good. And one of my friends I talked to, they were like, it's not really that great. And I was like, no, how could they mess that up? You can't mess that up. Like, it's got to be at least entertaining. And he's like, well, I'll just let you watch it. And I did. Now, I will say this installment of the franchise has the hard task of following Friday the 13th Part 6. Part 6 is loved by a lot of people. There's a lot of big fans of it. It was done very well. It had a cool soundtrack. There's not a lot of flaws to it. So when you jump to this film, which I think it digresses in a lot of areas in quality, in terms of characters, I mean, some of the characters go back to just the typical stoner, the typical sci-fi nerd, the typical nerd that doesn't feel pretty enough. You know, these are things that we saw earlier in the franchise, and you kind of hope the franchise would evolve as it goes. Even the 2 central parties in the movie, I kind of get a dynamic that's just like Friday the 13th Part 4, where you have Tina and her mom and Cruz kind of chilling in one house, and then just right over from that, you have a house full of teenagers that want to party, and the love interest to the main character. Like, you kind of just see similarities to Part 4. Now, this movie does have some bright spots, I feel, because I feel like this movie gets hated on a lot, and I could see why. I could definitely see why. But there are some good things about this film. One of them being Kane Hodder playing Jason. Kane Hodder is willing to do whatever needs to be done, whether it means having an entire roof collapse on his body, him jumping through a flight of stairs. I mean, he goes through the ringer in this movie. To add to the character Jason, I do think Jason has a very cool look in this film. I mean, he's been in the lake for a very long time, and they decided to make him actually have the marks and scars of all the past films. I mean, half of his back is revealing his spine. He's slimy, he's gross. It's a cool look for him. Jason looks very good in this film. I think the actress who plays Tina, she does a very good job in this film. She is very convincing as the troubled child who, you know, when she was a kid, she heard her dad abusing her mom. So using her psychic powers, she accidentally kills her dad. I mean, that would send someone over the edge. And she does a good job portraying that. I also like her story with the doctor, Dr. Cruz, who's just kind of using her, trying to find ways to harness her power. Her mom is very loving. They have a good connection. And I also don't mind the way they resurrect Jason. Tina going out on the pier trying to bring her dad back because she is full of guilt. And instead she brings back Jason. You know, that's pretty tough. You would think she would kind of have an idea that maybe a serial killer was down at the bottom, chained to a gigantic boulder. I mean, that general area, you think there'd be that legend of Jason Voorhees. Hey, you should be careful if you're going to bring people back from the dead. But I mean, you know, mistakes happen, and that's how this movie gets rolling. As we get rolling in this film, we kind of realize that Nick is going to be Tina's love interest, and I'm going to be honest, I think Nick's just kind of a forgettable character. I mean, you know his role. There's always this type of role in this movie. There's the final girl, and the final girl finds a guy that she has a crush on. They fall in love, and they try to fight off Jason. Nick is that guy. I think there was a dialogue between Nick and Tina to where Nick says, "So, where are you from?" And Tina kind of looks at him and goes, "So where are you from?" And then they both kind of laugh. But then they kiss because they're a romantic thing going on in this movie, and it has to happen for plot reasons. But yeah, Nick's not a very great character. Probably not the actor's fault. It was probably more just the dialogue and all that stuff going on. But along with Nick, there's another character that kind of comes into play, and I actually kind of like this character a lot. That character would be Melissa, the mean girl in this film. I actually like her just for her purpose of having a character to hate besides Dr. Cruz. I think she's definitely the meanest mean girl of all the Friday the 13th films. She takes that crown. And, she adds a little emotion to this film. You kind of hate her. She makes fun of Tina for being in a mental institute. And Tina responds by snapping her necklace. It makes conflict. It makes it interesting. Something a lot of these other characters, don't really provide. No one's going to watch this movie for the stoner guy and the two girls who like him are kind of competing for him. I don't know, that just little plot line. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's just kind of forgettable. And there's just not a lot of standout characters in this film. I mean, if you're not going to match parts 4 and parts 6, and even parts 2 and 3 to a degree, in quality, then you better at least have some funny characters like part 5 did. At least part 5 has Demon going, "Ooh, baby, oh, baby." Or you have Ethel just walking around threatening cops saying she has a bomb. Say what you want, but I find them entertaining. They're funny. They're goofy. And this movie kind of struggles with that. The characters aren't that wild or crazy. I mean, you have Nick's cousin Michael, who they get stranded because their car breaks down. Go figure. Happens all the time in these movies. But I mean, his response is the woods. And, that's goofy, but, it's not as crazy as what we've seen before. So it just kind of pales in comparison. Now, the biggest sin of what has happened to this movie, is what the MPAA did. The censorship. I mean, it is over the top, and it's crazy if you watch documentaries of behind the scenes. It seems like the MPAA is always after Friday the 13th. They always go hard at them. They submitted this film several times, and several times they tried rating this movie X, which the studio does not want, so that puts the director and the editor in a bind. I'm in parts 5. I wish the directors of this movie would have took notes of what the director in part 5 did. As infamous as he is, I mean, that guy ramped up the gore and the nudity and all these crazy things just as negotiating pieces. And the editor behind this film, he even said the MPAA, when they would give it an X rating and they would list a scene, they wouldn't go into detail as to what they wanted removed this time around. So it was really hard for them to try to adjust scenes, adjust the kills, to get it to where they could finally just get a rated R scene. And in result of that, we get a lot of kills that just kind of fall short. And I don't think it was planned that way. I think they had some creative stuff going for them. There was a sleeping bag kill where Jason picks up a girl and slams her against a tree 12 to 14 times. But they had to cut it down to just Jason hitting her against a tree once. We have Kate, who gets a party horn shoved into her face. And that's pretty creative. We get the tree trimmer weapon, which looked pretty darn cool. And we actually get the first motorized weapon that Jason ever used. But unfortunately, when the scene comes, the scene doesn't last that long, and we don't see a whole lot going. So, as the cool ideas that they had, all of it was cut down so much, and this film was just neutered so much. It just sucks. It really does. I feel bad for them. I think they had a lot of good things planned, but the censorship just kind of ruined all of the good kills. I mean, Dr. Cruz's death was literally designed for the motorized kill. I mean, that should have been the kill that was like the money shot. And I mean, they get him on the ground, Jason hovers above him with the tool, and you just see it for a brief second, then it's over. Like, it's not satisfying enough. I mean, the dude was a completely evil character. He was abusing Tina. I mean, we deserved a good payoff, and we didn't get it. We got the lead up to a good moment, but it just didn't pay off. I mean, a lot of the other kills, I mean, Jason's punching holes in people, snapping their necks, doing all this crazy stuff. There is one character I think who deserves a shout out though, and that is Sandra, the actress that played Sandra. I mean, how she dies, her boyfriend gets an axe to the head, and she's swimming in the lake, skinny dipping, of course. And while she's skinny dipping, Jason approaches her, Jaws style, and drags her underneath the lake to where, she drowns. I guess during this scene, it was 14 degrees outside in Alabama, and, she was in an actual lake. So, I mean, kudos to the actress for filming the scene, and being in that freezing cold water, because I don't know how she does it. I don't know. And I guess there was also a fear of alligators in this area, and the production company wasn't very familiar with the area, so they were afraid. So they actually hired a alligator wrangler. And the guy took the money, to watch over the set and all the scenes, but I guess what he knew and what the others didn't was that time of the year, alligators were not active. So he was basically just getting money to chill on the set of Friday the 13th and watch all the scenes go down. Pretty smart guy, if you ask me. I would have done the same exact thing. I would have been walking around the lakes acting like I seen stuff. Like, wait, stop. Like, hold up the entire production. And I go, okay, no, it wasn't an alligator. Continue. And just try to act like a professional, even though I know alligators aren't around. I'm a smart guy. There is kind of a cool sequence to where Tina is driving at one point in the film. And while she's driving, she has a vision of her mom being killed by Jason. I actually think it's a pretty cool scene. And when she sees it, she kind of freaks out, like pulls her car over and crashes into a tree, basically. And then she's got to go running into the woods. And this kind of goes into my least favorite part of the film, or at least one of my least favorite parts. And that's just them doing a bunch of running around in the woods. I know this is supposed to be like suspenseful. I mean, all the other movies kind of pulled it off pretty well. But this movie, it felt like there was a ton of just characters running around in woods. And Jason just kind of following them getting away, them tripping and falling, Jason getting closer. They spent way too much time doing chase scenes in the woods, in my opinion. Eventually we get to the climax of the film, which in my opinion is the best part of the film. I mean, there's even the scene where Melissa, the way she's disposed of, they cut it down, she gets an axe to the head, they show it for a brief second. But then Jason picks up her body and literally just flings her into the corner of the room, briefly over the TV. I cracked up whenever this scene happened. I thought it was great. One of the great parts of this movie. But to build off of that, Tina and Jason's showdown was really cool. I mean, this is what we were all waiting for when you hear Carrie versus Jason. Tina making the power lines come down to shock Jason. Tina making an entire porch collapse onto Jason. And I guess they actually did that stunt. And Kane Hodder underestimated how heavy that roof was when it fell on top of him. Tina making Jason fall through a flight of stairs. And I guess Kane Hodder came within an inch of slamming his head on actual real stairs underneath the fake stairs. Again, Kane Hodder selling out. And this sequence of the movie, this is where all the money went to. Tina ripping off Jason's mask. A great moment. In Jason's face, it's that decayed, monster-looking look. It's a great time. It's really fun. They go back and forth. They destroy the entire house. They actually blow up the house on set. And it is a great house explosion. That was a great moment. Kane Hodder was on fire for 40 seconds in the basement scene. Again, just good sequences of events during this part of the film. And eventually, though, as great as this all was, we get to the very end where Tina's on the pier and so is Jason. And they're fighting back and forth, and you're like, oh, how's this fight going to go? Like, it's got to go somewhere crazy. And Tina uses her powers to make her dad rise up out of the lake, grab Jason, and pull him back in. Drags him down to the lake. Jason's done, apparently. I don't know, part of me feels kind of conflicted. In the very beginning, the dad was abusing the mom. I think he was a drunk. The mom calls him out like, hey, you're drinking too much. And he was like, I'll do what I want. And then you hear a slapping sound. So her dad's not a good guy. And I don't know if this ending was just a point to try to make a kind of a rebound for the dad. Some retribution. Redeeming himself from the dead. I don't know. I don't know if it counts as redeeming when your psychic daughter revives you from the dead so that you can drag her killer down to the bottom of the lake. I don't know if that makes you a good person. But I know a lot of people don't like this ending, and I don't hate it as much as others, but it does feel very anticlimactic after the house explosion, Jason on fire, all the crazy things we just seen. So yeah, very controversial ending. I guess there was a final moment in this film the production company originally wanted, and that was for a fisherman to be fishing in the lake, and then Jason jumps out and drags him into the lake. Very identical to the first couple, 4 or 5. We've had that scene a lot in this franchise. We don't need any more. And I know the production company loved it. They kept wanting to remake it every time. Luckily, they cut it from the movie. That was one of the good cuts they did. So we don't have to see that whenever we see this movie. So, overall, I like the idea for the film. I like the main actress. I like the guy who plays Jason. I like Jason's look. I like some of the ideas they had. I like some of the plot they had of the evil doctor trying to harness Tina's powers. That's good stuff. I like some of the ideas for the kills. But just unfortunately, the execution didn't quite land for me. I find this movie kind of boring. And that's an incredible tragedy for the idea of film that they had. Especially with it following part 6, which is not boring. So yeah, this movie isn't terrible. It isn't the worst one in the franchise for me. But I do just kind of find this film boring, and it's kind of just a slog to get through, in my opinion. I know there's people out there that like it, and if you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. We all have opinions. But that is my review for Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. For those who have been following along with this franchise, I greatly appreciate it. For those commenting, giving their viewpoints on the film, that's great stuff. Keep doing that. If you feel like giving this video a like, I would appreciate that. It gets this video out to more people. And feel free to subscribe so you know when the next episode comes out. The next episode, we're going to Manhattan. Until next time.